Today, we're going to be talking about the complete timeline of Back to the Future. So let's hop in our DeLorean and chase Marty through time. There are 8 timelines in the Back to the Future trilogy, and I'm going to explain all 8 of them to you. Timeline A, 1985. This is the opening of Back to the Future, where we see Marty coming up to Doc's. He's chilling, he plays his guitar, he does that whole thing, and he goes and he meets Doc at the Twin Pines Mall. Einstein travels a minute into the future, then Marty travels back to November 5th, 1955. Marty is now in Timeline B. He alters the events, he makes his parents better people. At the end of Back to the Future, he returns to the future of Timeline B's 1985. And as we know, at the end of Back to the Future, Doc has already traveled to 2015 and is just now traveling back, and he picks up Marty and Jennifer, creating Timeline C. Why is there a Timeline C here? Well, because the future of Timeline B is the one where his son is arrested. Now that Doc knows that happens and he's come back to change that future is already different. The Timeline B 85 Biff sees this.
What the hell is going on here?
And remembers it. Old Biff steals the DeLorean in 2015 and heads back to 1955, creating Timeline D. And I do want to point out here, in Timeline D in 1955, there are 2 DeLoreans. The DeLorean from the first movie, and the DeLorean that Biff shows up in, traveling from 2015 to give himself the almanac. So when Marty and Doc return from 2015 to 1985, they actually create Timeline E. This is what Doc ends up calling 1985A in Back to the Future Part 2. Again, let me take a moment to explain why this keeps creating alternate timelines. So, Timeline E, for example, what we're talking about right now. In this timeline, in the 1955 era, several events happen in particular ways. The difference between D, E, and F is very slight. So after Biff gets the almanac, he becomes famous, he goes through all these things. But then in 1985, in Timeline E, Marty and Doc return from the future and realize something's wrong. And then they leave again, which creates Timeline F. And the difference between E and F would be that in F, there are 2 Martys, there are 2 Docs, there are 2 Biffs, and there are 3 DeLoreans. Versus the timeline of D, for example. This one doesn't acknowledge Marty and Doc coming back to 1985. Once they do that, that is a different universe. Then once they go back to 1955, that changes the timeline again, then they're in F. So when Doc and Marty arrive in 1955, creating Timeline F, they successfully prevent Biff from giving himself the almanac, wiping Timeline D and E completely from existence. Then the DeLorean is struck by lightning and is sent back in time, creating Timeline G. The ripple effect changes it from Timeline F in the G instantly, because before the DeLorean is sent back in time by the lightning, Marty is standing there in Timeline F. 10 minutes later, when he's standing there reading that letter, the DeLorean is already waiting for him in the cave, and it wasn't there 10 minutes ago. So he's not traveling to a different timeline, it's becoming one by the ripple effect. In this universe, Doc is already dead, but there is also another Doc alive in 1955. This is where we find 4 DeLoreans on the morning of November 12th, 1955, in Timeline G specifically. The first DeLorean Marty takes back in the original movie. Number 2, the DeLorean Biff takes from 2015 back to here. Remember, the futures he created from doing that are erased, but him still coming back and then getting foiled happens. Or does it? I don't know. To be honest, there are a lot of paradoxes in this, and I'm not even going to begin to try to explain them. We could be here all day. Number 3, the DeLorean from Timeline E when they traveled back, creating F. And number 4, the DeLorean in the cave that Doc hid in 1885. Then, Marty travels to 1885 himself, creating the final timeline, Timeline H. He saves Doc, they have an adventure, they go forward in time, yet again. All the positive changes they made are still intact. They've all learned a great lesson, and we're all super confused about all of these paradoxes. I created this timeline graphic using this as a template because I just found it to be less attractive. There wasn't a credit for who created this graphic either, but hey, shout out, guy. Let me know if you can think of any paradoxes in the Back to the Future trilogy timelines in the comments below. If you're a big Back to the Future fan, be sure to check out this other Back to the Future video I did comparing the ending of the first movie to the beginning of the second movie, and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower!